That night, Eleanor Voss had worn the most beautiful dress of her life, and she had not done it for anyone. At least, that was what she believed. But she was only seconds away from experiencing the most humiliating moment of her life. Now, I need to introduce Eleanor to you, because without knowing her, you cannot understand that night. Eleanor was the daughter of Thomas Voss, the head cook of Ashford Manor. Her father had worked in that house for more than 20 years. He ruled the kitchen. He knew where every spice was kept, what the Duke preferred for breakfast, which soup would be served in winter. Thomas Voss knew these things. Only he did. And Eleanor had grown up in that house. Those long corridors she used to run through as a child, the heavy books in the library she could barely lift with her small hands, the old apple tree in the far corner of the garden, all of these were Eleanor's memories. Ashford was not merely a manor to her, it was partly a home, perhaps something more than that. And William Ashford, the Duke, had grown up in that very house with Eleanor. As children, there had been no distance between them. The invisible boundary between the Duke's son and the cook's daughter had not yet been drawn. They ran together. They argued in the garden. Once, William had dropped Eleanor's book into the mud. Eleanor had thrown his favorite toy horse into the garden well. Neither of them had told anyone. They had that kind of understanding. But children grow up.
And when they did, the world told them something very clearly. You are the cook's daughter. He is the Duke. Eleanor understood this, truly understood it. She was a clever girl. Perhaps she had read more books than anyone else in that house. Perhaps her French was better than some of the Duke's guests, but social reality did not change. It never did. So she was the one who created the distance, quietly, painfully, but quietly. And William? As he grew, he tasted everything life had to offer. Parties, balls, women, freedom. The childhood memories with the cook's daughter became something distant. Pleasant, perhaps, but distant. Maybe he remembered them sometimes. Maybe he did not remember at all. Eleanor, however, always remembered. Let me say this plainly. It is difficult to pinpoint exactly when Eleanor's feelings for William began. Perhaps it was one afternoon beneath that apple tree when she saw him laugh. Perhaps later, when they had grown, watching him enter the ballroom from afar. Perhaps the feeling had always been there, and it simply took time for Eleanor to admit it to herself. But she did admit it, and then she buried it. Because Eleanor was a realist. The daughters of cooks do not end in happy stories with dukes. She knew that. Even in fairy tales, it was rare. So she lived her life. She had a place in the house, neither quite servant nor quite guest. She could enter the Duke's library. Sometimes she taught the guests' children. Sometimes she helped her father Thomas in the kitchen. A life where she was no burden to anyone, caused no trouble for anyone, and yet felt slightly out of place everywhere. She had accepted this. At least she believed she had. And then the letters began to arrive. The first one seemed ordinary, a small cream-colored envelope. Inside, a single line. I have always seen you, but I suppose you never looked. There was no signature. Eleanor read the note 3 times. Then she placed it in a drawer, then took it out again, then put it back. Who could have written it? One of the servants? A guest? Some absurd joke? But the handwriting was delicate, educated, and the sentence, that sentence lodged itself somewhere deep inside her, because in a way, it was true. Eleanor had been in that house for years, and yet she had always been invisible, neither fully here nor fully there. Someone had seen her. The second letter came a week later. As a child, you used to read beneath the apple tree. I always sat in the same corner just to watch you. The envelope slipped from Eleanor's hand. The apple tree. That tree in the back garden. No one from outside Ashford could have known that. Whoever this was, they were either in the house or knew it intimately. And then the thought came to her. William. No. Impossible. Completely impossible. William Ashford did not do things like this. He was direct, unrestrained. He approached any woman he wished openly. These shy, unsigned letters were not his style. But what if it was him? For weeks, Eleanor thought with herself. With each new letter, she wavered a little more, because the letters knew her, truly knew her preferences, her habits, the smallest details. And each time they stopped just short of crossing a line, always respectful, always measured. And precisely because of that, Eleanor could not stop herself. Then the final letter arrived. I must tell you about that night. The letter came in the evening. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. She must admit that. It said only this: Tonight, I am waiting for you. I cannot wait longer. That was all. No room number, but none was needed. In Ashford, there was only one place these letters could be pointing to: William's chambers. Eleanor sat for a long time. An hour, 2, she did not know. She thought. She used her reason, the same disciplined mind that had once learned to create distance. This could be wrong. This could be a trap. This could be something too impossible even to imagine. But then, her heart spoke. What if it wasn't? What if it really was him? What if all these years it had not only been Eleanor who felt something, but William as well, and both of them had remained silent? Eleanor stood. She opened her wardrobe. She took out her most beautiful dress. Because even the most rational people will risk everything for a single night of hope. That does not make them foolish. It simply makes them human. At 1:45, she stepped into the corridor. The house was silent. The candles had long been extinguished. Only a few wall lamps still burned. Eleanor walked without making a sound. With every step, the same question repeated in her mind. What if it really is him? And then she reached the door. William Ashford's chambers. A mahogany door, light spilling faintly from beneath it. She heard a voice. William's voice. And she knocked. When the door opened, William Ashford stood before her, his hair slightly disheveled, a smile still lingering on his face. That smile did not freeze when he saw Eleanor. On the contrary, it widened in a strange way. Because he had never seen her like this. Her hair was neatly arranged. Her midnight blue dress curved softly over her shoulders. Her neck was bare. And in her eyes, there was something. Fear, perhaps, or courage. It was hard to tell. For a moment, William could not speak. Then a woman's voice came from inside. William, who is it? The woman approached the door. She leaned against it, looked at Eleanor, then at William, then back at Eleanor. And she understood. A small, bitter smile appeared on her lips. This girl dressed for you, she said quietly. That much is obvious. William turned to her. Wait a second, I know what this is, the woman said. Her voice was not cruel, almost sad. You're just the only one who doesn't. Do you know what Eleanor felt in that moment? It was not shame, not only shame. It was something deeper, like being unable to hear your own voice, like everything you had buried for years rising to the surface at once. I'm sorry, Eleanor said. Her voice came out. That was something. It was not even trembling. Wrong door. And she turned. She stepped into the corridor, then another step. William said something behind her. Perhaps he called her name, but she did not want to hear it. She reached her room, closed the door, looked at herself in the mirror.
That beautiful dress, those carefully arranged curls. And in that moment, something inside her changed. It did not break, it changed. Because Eleanor Voss was not a foolish girl, and she still did not know who had truly written those letters. But she knew this much. The answer was not William Ashford. So who was it? To learn that, we will have to wait a little longer. The next morning, Eleanor woke early. This was not unusual for her. Mornings in Ashford were always early, but that morning was different. She stared at the ceiling and replayed the previous night in perfect order, coldly, piece by piece. The dress, the corridor, the door, that woman's voice. This girl dressed for you, that much is obvious. Eleanor rose, washed her face, gathered her hair, looked at herself in the mirror. All right, she told herself. All right.
This was something she had learned growing up. When something painful happened, when disappointment struck, when something inside her collapsed, she would say, "All right." It was not complaint. It was not surrender. It simply meant, "It happened. I accept it. Now what do we do?" All right. But something small and stubborn still remained inside her. Those letters. Who had written them? She began her daily tasks. Ashford was a large house, and Eleanor's place in it, as we have said, was always somewhat undefined, neither fully servant nor fully guest. But there was never a shortage of work for her. That day she had taken on indoor cleaning, upper rooms, guest chambers, and her father's room. Thomas Voss's room was small, close to the kitchen on the lower floor with little sunlight. It had filled over 20 years, books, notes, kitchen journals, scraps of recipes. Her father was not an orderly man. Eleanor had known that since childhood. She opened the door, stepped inside. First, she cracked the window open. Then she took a cloth, looked at the shelves. The same chaos, the same disorder. And she began to clean. She noticed a piece of paper that had fallen behind the shelves. It was small, folded, stuck in the back, forgotten. Eleanor bent down and picked it up. She opened it. Familiar handwriting, and the world stopped where it stood. Let me tell you something. There is a moment in your life, one moment, when you learn something and you know that nothing will ever be the same again. Sometimes it seeps into you slowly, piece by piece. For Eleanor, it happened all at once, because the paper in her hand was a draft, a letter draft. Crossed out sentences, corrections scribbled in the margins, 3 different versions of the same line. And she recognized the handwriting. It was her father's. Pause for a second. Her father's handwriting. That same hand that had written kitchen ledgers for 20 years, scribbled recipes, drafted shopping lists. The way he held the pen, the slant of the letters, that distinctive capital T. It was unmistakable. Eleanor covered her mouth, not to stop a sound, but because her hands needed somewhere to go. She kept holding the paper. The draft read, with its corrections along the margins, "I have always noticed you. I have always seen you, but I suppose you never..." Crossed out. Below it, "I have always seen you, but I suppose you never looked." Eleanor knew that sentence by heart. The first letter. The cream-colored envelope. The one she had hidden in her drawer. Then she looked at the bottom of the shelf. There was more. Folded papers, stacked, pushed aside. She took them all. Opened them. Read them. She stood there for a long time. She did not know how much time passed. 5 minutes, half an hour. The drafts were in her hands, written by her father. Her father, who had worked in that house for 20 years. Her father, who knew every one of her habits. The apple tree, the corner of the library, when she read, where she sat, what she looked at. Because every father knows these things. And he had used that knowledge to dress her daughter up and send her to the Duke's door. Now you might be asking, why? Why would a father do such a thing? Eleanor was asking herself the same question. And her mind began to work. She was intelligent, we have said that. Her emotions filled her, but her reason did not shut down. Her father had been different these past months. She had noticed it, but had not thought much of it. There had been tension in his face. His sleep had been irregular. He was no longer as talkative in the kitchen.
Once she had seen someone arrive late at the garden gate. Her father had spoken to the man in a low voice. Then the man had left. She had not asked then. Now she was asking. Gambling. She had heard the rumors. They circulated in every large house. Where Thomas Voss went on Sunday nights, who he sat with, small amounts disappearing from the kitchen budget. Eleanor had not wanted to hear them. Now she was hearing them. Her father was in debt, and his plan had been this. William Ashford was a known rake. Everyone in London knew that. Eleanor was beautiful. Everyone could see that. And there had been that old childhood connection between them. Thomas Voss had thought it through, calculated it, warmed his daughter slowly with letters, then sent her there that night. What exactly he had expected to happen, Eleanor did not want to think about, but the objective was clear. Draw William's attention to his daughter and somehow profit from that attention. To use his daughter as a means. Eleanor placed the papers on the table. She expected something inside her, tears perhaps, anger, the urge to confront him immediately. None of it came. Only that cold clarity arrived, the strange sharpness that comes when everything finally aligns. The letters had come from her father. The scene she witnessed last night was the result of his plan. And William Ashford had known nothing about any of it. She stood by the window for a long time. The garden was visible. In the far corner stood the apple tree. Eleanor looked at it from a distance. As a child, she had read beneath that tree. William would sometimes come and sit beside her. They would talk, argue, sometimes for hours. Back then, the world had not been this complicated. Or perhaps it had been, but they had not yet understood it. She gathered the papers, put them into her pocket. She left the room as it was, the cleaning unfinished. It did not matter. She stepped into the corridor. A decision was beginning to take inside her. Not fully formed yet, but its direction was clear. Eleanor Voss was going to leave this house. Not like a servant, not like someone disgraced or defeated, but she would leave. How, when, she did not yet know. First, she needed to speak to her father. How did that conversation go? I will tell you in the next part. She found Thomas Voss in the kitchen. Where else would she find him? The man had spent 20 years in that kitchen. He came early in the morning, left late at night. Stoves, pots, spices, this was his world, his kingdom. That morning he was preparing broth. His back was turned. Eleanor stood at the doorway and watched him for a moment. He had aged. She had noticed it more lately. His shoulders had sunk slightly. The white in his hair had spread. Eleanor touched the papers in her pocket, then stepped inside. "Eleanor," Thomas called, without turning.
He recognized her footsteps. "Are you here for breakfast? You're up early." "No," Eleanor said. There was something in her voice. Thomas heard it. He set the spoon aside, turned, looked at his daughter. She looked at him, and in that look Thomas Voss saw everything, understood it. There was no need for explanation. But Eleanor explained anyway. She took out the papers, placed them on the table, neatly, one by one. "I was cleaning your room," she said. "They had fallen behind the shelf." Thomas looked at the papers, then at his daughter, then back at the papers. He said nothing. Some fathers might have made excuses at that moment, might have denied it, might have hidden their shame behind anger. Thomas Voss did none of those things. He simply sat down, as if his legs had given out. He sank onto the stool by the stove and placed his hands on his knees. He looked like an old man, a tired man. "How much do you owe?" Eleanor asked. Thomas lifted his head. "Eleanor, how much?" Silence. Then Thomas gave a number. Eleanor did not blink, but something inside her tightened. It was not a small amount. "When did it start?" she asked. 2 years ago, Thomas said quietly. "It started small. Then," he stopped, rubbed his hands together. "Then I couldn't stop." "Who did you borrow from?" "It doesn't matter." "It does." Thomas lowered his head. "Men, not gentlemen." Eleanor understood. There was threat involved. Not just debt, pressure as well. She took a deep breath. "And as a solution, you chose me," she said. Her voice was flat, not shouting, not crying. That unsettled Thomas more than anything. "No," Thomas said quickly. No, that's not how I thought of it. William already knows you. There's a connection between you. I thought maybe..." "Maybe what?" Thomas fell silent. "Say it," Eleanor said. "Say what you thought, clearly." Thomas did not speak for a long time. Then, in a very low voice, almost inaudible, he said, "I thought William might like you, and if he did, it could go somewhere. Maybe he would protect you. Maybe he would pay my debt. Maybe..." "As if you were selling me," Eleanor said. "No." "Yes." "Eleanor, Yes, Father." Her voice remained steady. "You used me as leverage. You wrote the letters. You sent me to that room. You predicted what William might do and planned to turn it into an opportunity." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. Eleanor felt nothing. Or perhaps she felt something and simply did not show it. "I love you," Thomas said. "I need you to know that, despite everything." "I know," Eleanor said. "I was desperate. I saw no other way." "I know. Will you forgive me?" Eleanor looked at him for a long moment, at that tired face, those fallen shoulders. When she was a child, those shoulders had seemed broad, strong. She had believed her father feared nothing. Now, a diminished man sat before her. "I don't know," Eleanor said at last, honestly. "Right now, I don't know." And she turned. She left the kitchen, walked down the corridor, climbed the stairs, returned to her room. She closed the door, and for the first time that morning, alone, unseen, she paused. Just a few seconds. Then she opened her wardrobe and took out her suitcase. Did she make the decision in that moment? Not really. That decision had been made the previous night, in that corridor, as she turned away from the Duke's door. She had simply not admitted it to herself yet. Now she did. She would leave Ashford, this house, these corridors, these memories, her father, the Duke. Everything she had buried for years. She would leave. But where? There was one name in her mind. Mrs. Hartwell. A retired teacher. Someone who had taught Eleanor as a child and with whom she had occasionally exchanged letters since. An elderly, solitary woman, but sharp-minded. Once she had told Eleanor, "If one day you wish to leave this house and need somewhere to go, my door is open. A girl as intelligent as you should not be wasted." At the time, she had smiled politely. Now she remembered that sentence. She wrote a letter, kept it short. She asked Mrs. Hartwell whether that offer still stood. Then she wrote one more thing, not for herself, but for the Duke. A short note to William Ashford. What did it say? She apologized for the previous night, wrote that it had been a misunderstanding, something complicated involving her father, but not something William needed to concern himself with. And in the final line, she wrote, "As long as I remained here, my conduct toward you was always within the bounds of respect. I hope you will remember it that way." She signed it, sealed the envelope, left it on the table. She would not send it, at least not yet. She spent the rest of the day in silence. No one came looking for her. Her father had likely not left the kitchen. She did not know whether she saw William, nor did she wish to. Evening came. It would take at least a few days for Mrs. Hartwell's reply to arrive. Until then, she would remain here. But she would remain differently now, with the quiet of someone who is about to leave. 3 days later, the reply came. Mrs. Hartwell's handwriting was as it always was, precise, sharp, direct. "Come, there is a good room for you. You can give private lessons to a few families in the area and support yourself. We will figure out the rest." Eleanor read the letter, once, then folded it, put it in her pocket. She stood, opened her suitcase, began placing her belongings inside, neatly, with care. The morning she left Ashford, the sky was overcast. She carried her own suitcase. She had never been a burden, not even on her last day. As she descended the stairs, she encountered William Ashford in the entrance hall, unexpectedly. William looked at the suitcase, then at Eleanor. "Where are you going?" he asked. There was something in his voice, surprise, perhaps, or concern. Eleanor could not quite name it. "I'm leaving," she said. Nothing more. William took a step forward. "About last night. About that night, if something—" "It's all right," Eleanor said. "Truly." "But I wanted to say goodbye," Eleanor said. And she meant it. There was no bitterness in her voice, but no softness either. Only clarity. "I grew up in this house. There are good memories. I will remember them well." William said nothing. Eleanor inclined her head slightly, polite, but the kind of gesture exchanged between equals. And she walked. She stepped out the door. She did not look back. Now, you may be expecting something, that William regretted it, that he ran after her. He did not. Not that day. But when he walked back inside and stood alone in that entrance hall, he felt that something was missing. He could not name it, but it did not leave him. As the days passed, it did not fade. Small things. A corner in the library where someone used to sit. A book placed at the breakfast table. A sound in the corridor. All gone. William did not dwell on it. At least, he tried not to. But the absence remained. Eleanor, meanwhile, knocked on Mrs. Hartwell's door that very afternoon. The old woman opened it, looked at Eleanor, looked at the suitcase, looked back at Eleanor. "Good," she said simply. "Come in." And Eleanor stepped inside. 3 years passed. 3 years either diminish a person or grow them. They grew Eleanor. Her life in Mrs. Hartwell's home began slowly but steadily. In the first month, she taught 2 families, By the second, 4. By the sixth, she was known in the area as that young lady teacher. Her French was excellent, her mathematics precise, her knowledge of literature deep. Families were satisfied, children liked her. One evening at dinner, Mrs. Hartwell said, "When I first saw you, I thought, this girl is wasting herself." I was right. Eleanor smiled, a real smile, the kind that reaches the whole face. A man saw that smile. His name was Daniel Marsh, Mrs. Hartwell's nephew. He came from the countryside from time to time, a modest man, a lawyer, but without display. When he spoke thoughtfully. When he listened, he truly listened. At their first meeting, Eleanor barely noticed him. At the second, she noticed that he pretended not to notice her, but did. By the third, they both abandoned that pretense. Everything unfolded slowly. Neither of them hurried. One day, Daniel asked her, "You grew up at Ashford, didn't you?" "Yes," said Eleanor. "Was it good?"
Eleanor thought. She wanted to be honest. "It had its good parts," she said, "and parts that needed to be left behind." Daniel nodded. He did not ask more. Eleanor noticed that, and she felt something within her ease. Some people do not feel the need to know everything in order to understand something. Daniel was that kind of man. At the end of a year, Daniel proposed. There was no grand gesture. They were sitting in the garden, Mrs. Hartwell inside. Daniel set his cup down and said, "Eleanor, I want to spend my life with you, if you wish the same." Eleanor thought of that night, the corridor, the beautiful dress, the door. And she felt no pain, only gratitude, even for that night, because without it, she might not have been sitting in this garden, across from this man. "I do," she said. The wedding was simple, a small church. Mrs. Hartwell cried. She told no one, but everyone saw. Thomas Voss came as well. Eleanor had invited him. It had not been easy. Forgiveness and reconnection were not the same thing. She knew that. But he was her father, and he had paid most of his debts, freed himself from those dangerous men. He had diminished, aged. As Eleanor passed him during the ceremony, Thomas's eyes filled with tears. Eleanor paused, looked at him for a moment. Then she took his hand, squeezed it, let it go, and walked on. For now, that was enough. Perhaps in time there would be more, perhaps not. But in that moment, it was right. And William Ashford? I know you are wondering. 2 years later, Eleanor received an unexpected letter. It bore the Ashford seal. She opened it. William had written a short, honest letter. He had learned, somehow, why she had left Ashford. Eleanor never knew how. Perhaps from Thomas, perhaps from someone else. The letter said, "I owe you an apology for that night and for all the things I failed to see in that house over the years. I have heard that you are happy. That truly pleases me." And in the final line, "The apple tree is still there, in the back garden. I don't know why I felt the need to write that. Perhaps you do." Eleanor read the letter, then read it again. What did she feel? Anger? Sadness? That old feeling? None of those, really. Only a kind of understanding. Some people enter your life to teach you something, not to stay. William Ashford had taught Eleanor this. Knocking on the wrong door does not prevent you from finding the right path. Sometimes you must go there to understand where you need to turn back. Did she reply? She did. A short reply, polite, sincere. In the final line, she wrote, "I'm glad you remember the apple tree. I remember it well, too.
And that was enough. Some stories end with grand reunions, running, last-minute confessions, dramatic turns. Eleanor's story did not end that way, because Eleanor was not that kind of story. That night, in that corridor, as she turned away from that door, something inside her had not broken. Something had been built. She had learned not to leave her worth in the hands of someone else's decision. Her father had not taught her that. Pain had. And pain at times is the most honest teacher. Eleanor Marsh, formerly Eleanor Voss, moved into a small house with Daniel that winter. There was no apple tree in its garden, but there was a garden. And in spring, Eleanor would decide what to plant. That made her happy. Truly, deeply happy.